Do you ever find, and I found this when I worked in corporate America a little bit, I don't know if it was necessarily corporate America, but I found that sometimes I lost that joy of programming. Like there's always a little bit of joy, but like sometimes like I don't know what it is, but like I have days where it's just like kind of a drag and I'm like, I don't want to do this. And I don't know, do you get that? Or are you always super energized and excited about Welcome to the LabVIEW Experiment. I'm your host, Sam Taggart from SAS Workshops. If you're a developer looking to unlock your potential and take your skills to the next level, then look no further. From freeing your imagination and experimenting with new ideas and workflows, to exploring aspects of software development you've never even considered before, I'm going to help you grow your craft so you can approach your work like an artist and have more fun with what you do. In my 15 years working with and training developers, I've helped dozens of individuals and organizations embrace a growth and learning mindset that allows us to overcome challenges and embrace failure as the essential learning experience it is. If you're ready for the philosophies, strategies, tips, and tricks that will unlock your creativity, then it's time to get to work. So, welcome to the LabVIEW Experiment. My name is Sam Taggart. I'm the host, and I'm here with Enrique Arias. Did I pronounce that right?
Hi, Sam. Thank you for the invite to this new podcast, the LabVIEW Experiment. I'm very pleased to be here with you.
Yeah, it's a very new podcast, actually. In fact, you are the first guest that I'm interviewing. So I don't know what order these will come out in, but you are the very first interview. So that's pretty cool.
Nice.
And we are here at GDevCon NA.
Yeah.
So is this your first trip to the United States? I imagine you've been here before.
Not the first one, but the first GDevCon and the first with the programming language purpose. So in the past, I came to Salt Lake City for some training and Disney, and now I'm here in GDevCon.
So does NI do any events in Mexico? Like I know they do NI Week in Austin, but do they do anything in Mexico?
Yes, there is NI Week, NI days. It's just 2 days or just 1 day, but I think they get rid of these kind of events in Mexico. So we don't have NI events in Mexico yet.
Yeah, they used to have this 1 day or 2 day traveling thing that they would do around in different cities in the U.S. too. I remember it came to Pittsburgh and they used to do it in Denver. Yeah. And that's kind of fallen off. So that's hopefully what we're trying to pick up with the GDevCon NA, kind of give it an alternative to that. Yeah. With less NI marketing and more technical presentations, which is so.
Probably someday there will be a GDevCon in Mexico.
I am signing you up as the official ringleader of that.
That would be cool.
We're trying to get one started. Well, Chris Farmer is trying to start one over in Australia, GDevCon Down Under. So that will be very interesting too.
Yeah.
All right. I don't want to spend the whole time talking about GDevCon NA because there's lots of other cool stuff to talk about. So tell me a little bit about your background. I know you were a teacher, a professor, right, at a university?
Yeah. So I fell in love with LabVIEW when I was studying electronics and telecommunications. It was 1999. So eventually I became the LabVIEW teacher in the same university, Universidad de La Salle Bajío. I've been teaching LabVIEWs for about 18 years, almost 19. So I teach virtual instrumentation, data acquisition systems. There are a lot of students remembering me. I've been improving myself over the years. But yeah, I'm a LabVIEW teacher. Then in 2008, I became I started working at the Centro de Investigaciones en Óptica. It's an optical research center doing a lot of software with very weird instruments like photon counters and looking amplifiers, lasers, motors, etc. I did a little bit of image processing, image DX, and that kind of stuff. And eventually the COVID happened and I started getting involved in the LabVIEW community, and there is a really long history about that. But I started working with Fab
I was
at
going to ask
Della.
you about that.
Yeah. So
How did you end up working with Fab?
So in 2016, she was the instructor of the LabVIEW Basics 1 and Basics 2. This is the the ancestors of Core 1, Core 2, and Core 3. It was in Querétaro. I was attending to his classes. So she was really good in this training, and this left me like on a spark. So after I was teaching LabVIEW before that training, and I was thinking I was really good with LabVIEW, but then after that training, I realized there is a lot of things I didn't knew. Yeah. So I start going to the training whenever I can. Then Fab published his book, LabVIEW Graphical Programming. I bought the book. I read it, everything. So I contact her through LinkedIn, and I congratulate. I say, Fab, congratulations. She speaks Spanish. So yeah. Fabiola, felicidades. And we start talking, and then COVID happened, and there's a lot of things. The BI Summit, GLA Summit, and I start growing up our relationship. So eventually she invited me to start working as a software contractor for Delacorp. And I started learning a lot of DQMH. So she's the lead architect of DQMH. My first modules were very poorly designed, but I started learning a lot of DQMH stuff. She became my LabVIEW sensei, my mentor. And so this is how I ended up here. I quit my job. I started my LabVIEW businesses in Mexico. It's called PantherLab. It's really new, but I am doing software consultancy and LabVIEW training and that kind of stuff. And I quit my job in the Centro de Investigaciones en Óptica to follow my dreams with LabVIEW.
Cool. I have a couple questions, actually. So one goes back to something you said at the beginning, that you started out teaching. So as somebody who both teaches LabVIEW and writes LabVIEW code, like which one are you more passionate about? Like if you had the choice, which one would you choose? Or which one gives you more energy?
Teaching LabVIEW or what?
Or writing LabVIEW code?
Both has something. I like, when I am teaching LabVIEW, I like to be present in this aha moment. Hey, Profe, Enrique, look, it's moving, it's turning on. So it is amazing to see those reactions with my students. But when I write in code, not always, but sometimes I feel like in the zone, and that is really good when a really complex problem makes sense. So sometimes we start working and just focus on one small portion of the problem, but when we know how this small part of the problem is working with a bigger picture, is really awesome. So both sides has rewards.
Do you ever find, and I found this when I worked in corporate America a little bit, I don't know if it was necessarily corporate America, but I found that sometimes I lost that joy of programming. Like there's always a little bit of joy, but like sometimes like I don't know what it is, but like I have days where it's just like kind of a drag, and I'm like, I don't want to do this. And I don't know, do you get that, or are you always super energized and excited about
No. I will lie if I said yes, but I try to keep me self-motivated, finding new stuff, maybe just learning some new tricks with I like to interact with LabVIEW and other programming languages. So I have a little bit of experience creating mobile apps. So I like to implement stuff and make LabVIEW talk with another stuff. So it is really rewarding, way much fun, and maybe someday it's will be rewarded.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is like, I think you hinted on this, and it's true for me too. Learning new things for me is really energizing and gets me excited. Like, I feel like if I'm doing the same old thing day after day after day,
Yeah.
it loses some of its appeal. And also too, like one of the things I think is sometimes people, particularly I think in corporate worlds, but they feel stuck. Like there's a process or that's causing the problems, or there's like code that's like making life difficult for them. And I think sometimes we forget that like that works for us.
Yeah.
Right? Like we created the code, we created the process for how we write code. So if it's not working, like why not change it? Why not make it better? So
Yeah, totally. Yeah, sometimes the corporate world is super thinking inside the box. So you don't have enough space to look to the other sides. So that's because I am here.
yeah, well, I read a very interesting book. It was the DevOps book. What's it called? The Phoenix Project. Have you read that book?
No, not yet.
I recommend it. It's a good book. But basically, it was about thinking on the bigger picture. And I've also read this book recently called Thinking in Systems, and both of them are really good books. I highly recommend them. But it was about like one of the things it talked about was like local optimization versus like throughput, and like you can try to optimize one part of the system, but if that's not the bottleneck of like where things are stopped up, like it doesn't do any good, right? So you got things like flowing through a system. If you have this bottleneck and things are backing up behind it, if you optimize what's downstream of that, that's fine, but it's not affecting your output because that's not the limiting factor. If you optimize upstream, all you do is make things pile up quicker, right? And so part of it was trying to do this analysis and figure out like where the bottleneck was. And I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah.
But I don't think most LabVIEW developers think in those type of holistic terms.
No. Yeah, probably if an application loads in, let's say, 5 to 10 seconds, and you try to optimize it to load in 2 seconds, but once the application is loaded, it is the same. You got no value.
Yeah.
So it makes more sense to make life easier to the person will be standing in front of the application whole day and pressing buttons, and that is where you will be most rewarded. Your user will be more pleasant.
So one thing I find, I feel like as LabVIEW developers, we're generally, and Q is the exception because we just watched Q give his like awesome UI thing on the touch panel, which is awesome. You should go watch it when the videos are out, if they're not out already by the time you're listening to this.
Yeah.
But I feel like we're really bad at user interface, and I think it's a couple parts. Like part of it is like we are targeting other engineers, and generally engineers are not the most aesthetic people, right? Like we just care if it works. Like the looking pretty part, like doesn't really care. We don't really care about that a whole lot. But I feel like we don't put enough emphasis on the user experience and also the developer experience. Because I kind of have this theory that, when we think of code, a lot of people think of like ones and zeros and manipulating the compiler and all this stuff, but it really like code is written by human beings with other human beings for other human beings, right? It's this tool that we use. And I feel like we put so much emphasis on the tool itself and on how to do things in LabVIEW and all this, and we forget about like the human part of it and the human experience.
Yeah, this is one of the things I learned with Fab. So I must confess, I was trying to look smart for her. So I try to impress her with a lot of fancy classes, factory patterns, or weird code. So she talked to me and say, think in the terms of the end user. You don't have to impress him to make your application look, make the application and the user think, oh, Enrique is so smart. Think in terms of the user doesn't know you, doesn't care who wrote this code. The user just have to be very easy with the selections. Uh, I remember once time I was doing a factory pattern when I was launching a module. I searching for all the classes implementations. So I was broadcasting a bunch of arrays to the API tester to let the user select one class. So Fab say to me, "Oh, this is weird. Uh, what do you think the user will be? How the user will be using your module? You are giving him the hard task to select between a lot of classes. He must look for the class hierarchy, note the implementations. Do you think it is comfortable for you, user?" Oh, and I keep no. So I was trying to look smart, and then I switched in my mind um, to create applications more easy to use. If the purpose is to work with another developers, I try to do the things more easy to understand, not to look smarter. Mm-hmm. So this is one kind of philosophy. So if your coworkers or the people you are working with are not familiar with classes, don't use classes. Mm-hmm. So this is a really simple rule of thumb. Make the code friendly for all the people working in.
Yeah, I was going to go a different direction, but that just sparked something to me. I think of it, we call it writing code, right? And when you're writing, like if you're writing a novel or something, the first thing you do is you think about your audience.
Yeah.
So if you're writing to a kindergartner book, you're going to use way different words than if you're writing a college textbook.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes we forget that. And I think part of it's that ego thing too. I think, as developers, we just want to prove how smart we are.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be validated in how smart they are. And so the easy way to do that is make things really complex.
Yeah.
But I was listening to John Osterhow. He wrote a book. I forget what the name of it is. You can go look it up. But he was talking about pushing complexity down. And it kind of goes with what you're saying. And it goes with what Fab's always saying to me. It's like when you're writing your unit test or your API tester, the more work you have to do in the unit test or the API test to set things up, those are things that the users of your code are going to have to do.
Yeah.
Right, like what you were talking about. If I have to get this object and then prepare it a certain way and set all these things and then pass it off to the module, your end user is going to have to do that. And John Osterhout was talking about pushing complexity down, taking some of the decisions away at the higher level and incorporating them inside your module. And I thought that jived with what Fab was saying about that.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I am trying to say.
Yeah. No, it's kind of cool how all those things come together.
Yeah.
So do you listen to any podcasts or read any books about
coding? Not right now. Just the Chris Farmer DQMH podcast.
Yeah.
And no, not recently. I more like a web. I search stuff in the web and learn from, because I'm not a native English speaker, so not all the podcast is friendly with my hearing. So it's best for me to read.
So you like reading then as opposed to like videos or something? Okay.
Yeah, this is how I learn English. Just reading, and Google Translate is my friend.
Oh, okay, cool, very cool. So, where do you read about software stuff?
I'm like test-driven development. Um, Unit testing is pretty much in the same concept. In the past, I used to read a lot of LabVIEW object-oriented stuff to understand that this is a really hard topic when you're an old developer and you always do task-oriented programming language, and you are switching to object-oriented. It's a really hard decision and really hard task. But I started learning in my free time.
I think it's kind of interesting because object-oriented programming, I mean, it was around 10 or 12 years ago. Like, I remember like 2012, 2010. I don't remember when they introduced, maybe 2008, 2009. But it's funny because we're kind of behind the curve in LabVIEW in a lot of ways. And like object-oriented programming now is like the thing to do in LabVIEW, the actor framework and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But other programming languages have moved on now, and now they're into this functional programming, which I find quite interesting, actually. I quite like the idea of functional programming in the sense of things that have side effects are really hard to test. So if you have a function that does some calculation and writes it to a serial port or something, or sends it off somewhere, that is really hard to test. But if you pull out that calculation part, you can then test that calculation part. And to me, I mean, I'm a complete novice at functional programming, but that's kind of my understanding, is to try to write more code that just takes some data in and basically, I forget what the word that they use is, but it's like, it just transforms the data. It doesn't have any side effects. So like the same inputs always generate the same outputs, no matter what's going on outside of it. And I think that makes it really easy to unit test stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I think LabVIEW programmers must work just in the middle. Object-oriented is really cool and very powerful, but sometimes stand in the middle. Functional programming with object programming, you have to do things in two ways and create.
I think object-oriented programming is like a lot of things. I think it's like salt, right? Well, I don't know that you need a little bit, but you could definitely use a little bit. Like most LabVIEW programs, I think, could benefit from a few objects.
Yeah.
But I do think it can be overdone. And I've seen people who have like all these layers of abstractions and stuff. And Norm had a great quote, I think, last year at GDevCon, and it was something like, one man's abstraction is another man's
obstruction.
Obstruction, that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I couldn't think of that word. But yeah, that's a great quote because, there were some presentations there, and they kind of lost me with all the different layers and trying to keep track. And so
yeah,
that's one of the things I like about DQMH. I had this discussion with Alan about, you take DQMH and everything's in the block diagram and it's like right there, versus actor framework, you kind of have to program in the project. And Alan was saying, well, there's nothing wrong with that. And there is nothing wrong with that, but it's just kind of, I think, how your brain works and what's easier for you. And for me, like DQMH, for that reason, I think it speaks to me a little bit more. Like, yeah.
You with DQMH, you are more in the context of what you are doing. When I was trying the actor framework stuff, when I was switching between the code and browsing the project, sometimes I get lost and I forgot where I was and where I wanted to go. So it's good to have the focus on the thing you are trying to solve.
Yeah, I think like maintain that context is good.
Yeah.
To be 100% fair to Actor Framework, Casey is part of the AF Guild, and he's got a tool that makes that easier. I've seen a demo of it. I haven't played around with it, but so for anybody who's listening, if you're using Actor Framework, you should check out that tool because it does help with that context.
Yeah.
Because context switching is really a major problem. One of my issues with Actor Framework is, particularly if you inherit a project. So part of the problem is that every Actor Framework project I've inherited, and to be fair, right, Christian pointed this out to me, like I inherited the project, which means that if it was a really good project, everything was going well, I probably wouldn't have inherited, right? Although sometimes people move on, but like, I inherited the project. Most of them are not very well documented. And so I open it up and I see an actor. Okay, great. And I look and I see oh, here are the methods that are on the actor, and I can see the messages, and it's all contained. But one of the things that's not immediately obvious in the project is that that actor inherits from 3 or 4 other actors, and it can accept all the messages that they can accept, right? And
Yeah.
in DQMH, you have that problem because it's all in the one library and everything's right there. But Casey has a tool, and I'll probably have to interview Casey about this. And he's going to present at GDevCon in A. So anybody who's listening, you can watch that once it's out.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of like your Panther dashboard, your
Yeah.
DQMH dashboard, which we'll talk about. So yeah, it opens up and it shows you all the messages that it can inherit and which actor it comes from, and you can. I don't know if you've seen this, but when you have a dynamic dispatch VI, right, you can double click on it, you can open up the window and you can scroll through and see which dynamic dispatch, what the block diagrams are. It does that for the messages. So it shows you, if I send it this message, this is the code that executes. So it kind of gives you that DQMH experience of like, okay, I'm in the actor and I'm looking and now I can scroll through all the cases. Oops, didn't mean to make noise there.
It is a really weird coincidence that browsing the browser and my Panther dashboard pop up almost the same time, because kind of are related tools to different frameworks. So maybe there is a need there, and we are trying to fill this little hole of not losing context.
Yeah, well, I think that's interesting because I think people were working on trying to solve the same problems. They just do them in different ways because Actor Framework and DQMH and the JKI state machine objects and all of those things all kind of came out around the same time, and they all kind of solve the same problem, but in slightly different ways.
Yeah.
And they're all about how to have these parallel things going on and how to get messages back and forth and how to do that in an orderly fashion.
Yeah.
Alan pointed out an interesting thing the other day. I'm going to have to talk to him about when I interview him, but I think it was the last GDevCon over in Birmingham, he said something like, Actor Framework and DQMH are not the architecture of your program, right? The architecture is how you separate the different things that are going on into the modules and how they communicate. And the DQMH and the Actor Framework and state machine objects we're using are just like the glue that kind of holds it together.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a very interesting take on it.
Yeah. There is... Actually, there is one article you wrote, the do's and don'ts about the DQMH. So I read that, and it's really interesting. If you launch another module, this module doesn't know about the launcher, doesn't know everything. If you want to make this module realize something, use a broadcast.
Yep.
So this really cool article about DQMH.
Yeah, I have a little video on YouTube. You can look it up, that talks about how to make sure that the modules are independent and not coupled together. I think coupling is something that I think people don't. I think that's coupling and dependencies are what separate beginner to intermediate programmers from advanced programmers. I think beginner to intermediate programmers don't think about those things and don't realize it. And they create messes. And part of the problem is things work for a while and you don't see the side effects until the program starts to grow. And by the time you see the side effects, the program has grown and you've cobbled so much stuff on that, then it's become this big blobby mess. And yeah, it's not intentional, right? Like I try very hard not to like blame people because everybody operates at like their own level of competence at the moment, right? What they know and what they've been taught. And I think if we're noticing that a lot, I think it's on us as a community to educate people more and get the word out and try to help people.
Yeah, actually, my Panther dashboard search into the dependencies because we often we use modules and DQMH, and sometimes we don't add these modules, or maybe we are not really conscious the module is being a dependency. So I am searching for these under the dependencies for DQMH modules to make the user realize all the modules playing in the same project. So maybe you are using a module and you didn't realize that that module is there.
I really need to play with your dashboard more. I saw the demo that you gave to the DQMH Trust Advisor. It's really good. The tool that I like for that right now at the moment that I use a lot is AntiDoc. I think AntiDoc is just amazing
Yeah.
because it really lets me do iterative development. And I just like, I've inherited some projects where the coupling is all wrong. And I just go in and I change like 1 or 2 messages at a time. And then I rerun AntiDoc and I look at it and I can see that, okay, yeah, that one line that's coupling these two things is broken. And okay, now I've got these other 2 or 3 lines of messages going back and forth that I have to change and massage. So that gets us into the Panther Dashboard.
Yeah.
So one of the questions I always want to make sure I ask everyone is, tell me about a time that you did an experiment, you tried something new, and it didn't work out the way you wanted. And part of the point of that is to encourage people to experiment and explore and try new things. And as part of that, I feel like we have to normalize failing or things not turning out right.
Yeah.
So you have some experience with that with the dashboard. So why don't you tell me about the dashboard and how it started and some of the issues you ran into?
So this dashboard used to have another name. Comes with the DQMH 6.1 release. It has a scripting API. What I was trying to do is to create the number 2 version of Panther Sniffer. It's a mobile app to communicate with modules. I was trying to create improved version with the mobile app, triggering some events from your phone, but I failed. It was too complex at the moment, maybe in the future. But I started playing around with the scripting. I was trying to get a lot of information of the project, send that information to the phone, and the phone will be drawing a fancy user interface for each module. This was my initial idea, but I don't know why and when I changed my mind, but I think I know the answer. I start socializing my ideas with the DQMH consortium, with you, with Chris Farmer, a lot of developers, with Oliver Jordan from AntiDoc, and each one of you give me some ideas on I would like to, and this thing that has one direction in the beginning become way much different. And the beginning, well, at the end of the development of this application, I create a package, and the developer needed to add some code to their application, to the project, to use the dashboard. So Oliver and Dan from the Prime Test tell me, oh, this dashboard looks like it is a tool, not a development stuff. So why I need to add code to my project in order to use your tool? So it is not a development stuff. And I was completely in the same direction, but the how do you say, application instances?
Yeah.
So these application instances was my problem. I was trying. I actually create a package to launch to the tools menu, but this package were using another application instance. So in a moment, it becomes like a clonable stuff, a singleton module running in the project, and with the dashboard, I open another front panel, and it is a singleton. Why do I have 2 panels of the same thing? So I was running in completely different application instances. So I went back to the functions palette, But then I start socializing my problem, and the experiment became reality again. So at the end, I was able to launch the dashboard for the tools palette, but this was a really, really huge problem for me. Maybe it's the hardest one because the application instances are weird.
Well, I think anybody who has ever written any scripting tools, particularly anything that runs from the tools menu, is probably chuckling along to that description, because I feel like everybody runs into that. That's a piece of knowledge that I feel like we need to distribute better on the LabVIEW wiki or something, or make it better known, because it causes really weird behavior and nobody has any idea what's going on.
Yeah.
And then you figure it out. So somebody tells you, or you stumble upon a blog post or something, you're like, oh, that makes sense now. But they're pervasive, because everywhere you open a class or a library or something, or a project even, you have this app reference, and most of the time you don't wire it and nobody cares.
Yeah.
But as soon as you start running another app instance, it's like, oh gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the cool thing I think about my Panther Dashboard is an open source project, so everyone can watch how I solve this problem. I grab some code and play around, even with another architectures. So it is designed for DQMH, but it is an open source project. Everyone can see the code and
and you're going to give a presentation about that. Is that tomorrow?
Yeah.
There's tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
So that will be available on the GDevCon NA YouTube channel at some point. So
yeah, cool.
If you like this podcast and you like to listen to Enrique talk about it, you should go check out his presentation.
Yeah.
So I don't want to turn this into an advertisement for my Mastermind Group, but you have been going to the Mastermind Group, and the story you just told tells me that there's a need in the LabVIEW community for people to share ideas and bounce them off of each other, and that collective kind of brainstorming type thing. And we get some of that at events like GDevCon, but can you talk about how the Mastermind helps you with that type of stuff, or like what you got out of that?
Yeah, actually, I talked about my problems in the Mastermind Group. Actually, you did a huge contribution to my dashboard with, hey, why do you just open the API tester? So this solved my I was stuck in one idea to create another user interface for each of the events, and trying to do polymorphic API tester. So this was weird. And you just tell me, why do you open the API tester? Oh, yeah, that will solve my problem. The API tester is there. So why do I need to do a lot of work if the work is already there? So this Mastermind Group is really awesome, because maybe if you are stuck in your ideas and you don't expose those ideas with another developers with a neutral view of your problem, probably you end giving up your ideas. So sharing with other developers is really, really awesome.
Yeah, I think part of that, it speaks to too, having somebody from the outside come in and look at it, because you're kind of stuck at looking at it from a certain perspective.
Yeah.
And you can't see around the corner, right? You just have this view from like one particular corner.
Yeah.
But there's a whole other side to the object, whatever it is. And sometimes somebody from a different vantage point can see things and point things out that you just completely miss, because they're just hidden from your view.
Actually, Panther Dashboard is built with a lot of contributions. Mexican friends, Cesar, Diego, they Cesar has the same problem I used to have. Panther Dashboard can edit the event descriptions and can edit the library descriptions in order to after run AntiDoc and create these amazing documents. So this idea of editing is from Cesar. He said, hey, Enrique, I always have typos. I don't write English really good. Do you know who I'm talking? So I have a lot of typos, grown verbs, and I wanted a tool to easily correct these typos. So socializing is really, really awesome.
Well, don't feel bad, Cesar, because I speak English very well and I still have tons of typos. So my brain works faster than my fingers sometimes. So
Oh, I don't feel bad.
no,
That's what
I
I
know.
say.
It's just,
Yeah.
yeah. No, that's cool.
It's just a fact.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. We all get typos. So some more than others. But
Yeah, but having a tool to rethink, maybe with Panther Dashboard, you start with an event and let's say star acquisition. And sometimes you don't write any description. After several months, you want to add the description of your request. So it is really difficult going to the project, open the broadcast or the request, go to the icon, right click, a lot of clicks, and nobody does that. So this tool grabs all this stuff with scripting and make our lives easier.
you've been hanging out with Darren too much because Darren's always talking about how many clicks it takes to do stuff and making it easier.
Yeah.
The one thing I like about the Panther Dashboard and AntiDoc and Bowser the browser and these tools is I feel like as LabVIEW developers, we tend to focus on the details and we're focused on like this VI, and it's hard sometimes to see the entire architecture. And I feel like those tools help you to better see the bigger picture of the architecture and how the modules are laid out and how they talk to each other. And also, sometimes we document that, we draw drawings and stuff, but we don't always go and update those. So these tools actually like generate the stuff from the code itself. So there's no mismatch where like, oh, I drew out the diagram, my actor tree this way. And then as I was implementing, I made some changes, but I didn't reflect that in my drawing, which is now out of date. And so these tools that like look at your code and then generate this information and help you view, I find they're very useful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a philosophy of developer experience. So
yeah, no, that's definitely something Fab talks about all the time. And it didn't, I mean, it kind of occurred to me, but I didn't take it as seriously until I hear Fab talk about it all the time. But I do agree. I think developer experience, and the other thing that I think Fab talks about this, for York talks about a lot too, is that debug driven development I think is very interesting of trying to write your code in such a way that it's easy to debug.
Yeah. Actually, the DQMH consortium has this tool to create like a diagram. I don't know how to.
Olivier's tool, the sequence diagram.
Diagram, living sequence diagram. So there are a lot of tools to help us to understand the project, how is behaving, who talks with that.
Well, it's interesting because I was talking about debug-driven development in New York, but I find, and maybe you found this, before I started doing test-driven development, I found I spent a lot of time debugging things. Yeah. And since I started doing test-driven development, I started taking smaller steps. I find that I debug a lot less because I feel like I get it right the first time because I've got the test and I know it works. And then also by taking smaller steps, if I make a mistake, I spend a few seconds looking at it and see if it's something obvious. But if it's not, I just throw it away. I go and get it and I just like throw it away. And I feel like sometimes we're afraid to do that, which I find really interesting because Git makes it so easy. Yes. And yet people are afraid to throw stuff away. Yeah. So, because I've watched people spend like an immense amount of time debugging something when all they had to do is throw it away and start over, and they'd have been done in like 2 minutes. And instead they spend an hour trying to debug to figure out why something doesn't work. And on some level, I understand that because when something doesn't work, I want to know why. Like it's never satisfying to me to have a bug and then all of a sudden it just goes away because you have no idea why it's there and if it'll come back or whatever. But I feel like if you're developing and you just take a misstep, a typo or something, and you can't find it immediately, just throw it away.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm weird or I don't know, but maybe it's a mental block that people have. I like this
driven development because it adds context to the problem you are trying to solve. Yeah, I one of the guys debugging a lot of hours, and with the DQMH and Actor Framework is really hard because you have to launch a lot of stuff in order to the code reach to one specific region. So with test-driven development, you get rid of all the other related code in order to run on a small portion of your problem you're trying to solve, and it gives you like a harness and like a snapshot of in the time. When I was trying to learn test-driven development, I used to write the initial code in BIs, and then one of the things I learned from Fab is to start putting a lot of constants. So it is important in test-driven development to use constants, because
For
if
the
you
inputs, yeah.
yeah, if you use code, your test pass. But what if you change some part of the
Yep.
code that you are using to as an input to other?
Well, also sometimes you find people recreating the algorithm they're testing in the test, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's doing the same thing. Yeah, I found that. So what I found out, so I gave a presentation at like one of the GDevCons, and it was on test-driven development, and I didn't get it right. There's quite a few things I got wrong in that presentation, but I wrote the API first. It was for like these TDMS headers thing to like read and write clusters for TDMS headers, and I wrote the API first, and that worked. And I'm not saying that's like a bad approach if you're doing that, but what I started doing is I start with a blank test, and I drop a flat sequence structure, and I put constants in. I say, okay, if I pass these two constants in, right, I expect to get out some data type, right? And so I'll drop a constant to that, and then I'll wire that up, and that's my test. And I run the test and I watch it fail. And then I take that sequence structure, and I know what my inputs are, and I know what my output's going to be, and then I do edit create sub VI. And that is the sub VI now that I'm testing. Yeah. And it's kind of cumbersome because if you're using classes, then you got to drag into the class and add some class constants and stuff. But it really forces that, like, starting with the test first.
Yeah.
And Fab makes this point. I've really noticed that too. Like, your tests are the first users of your API. And so it helps with that pushing the complexity down, right? Because you don't want to have to do all these calculations first and all these setup before you do your test.
Yeah. When I was learning test-driven development, I used to write the code first. It worked. And then Fab, where is the unit test? Oh, I write the unit test after. And I write the unit test in order to make the code, everything pass.
Yeah.
So, but this is not the point of test-driven development. You have to first know if I place these numbers, I should get this answer. If I place this, the answer should be this. So you have to test. You have to have an expectation of the behavior of the component you are trying to create before it is created. So it is a mindset you have to.
Yeah. Well, I hope somebody at NI Training is listening to this podcast, because I think they got it wrong. I think they teach unit testing and test-driven development. I don't even think they teach test-driven development. They teach unit testing, at least, but in one of the advanced classes. And unit testing itself is not that hard of a concept to grasp if you think of the fact that when you write a VI, one of the first things you do, like say you write something to convert Celsius to Fahrenheit, one of the first things you do after you write that VI is you open it up and you put in a number that you know, and you press the button and you make sure the right value comes out on the other side.
Yeah.
Unit testing is just taking that and dropping it in a VI with some constants. That's it.
Yeah.
And it's not like, we treat it like it's this magic thing. And so people don't understand, like beginners, when they first start LabVIEW, they don't understand unit testing. And so then test-driven development is even harder to understand. And the other thing that the NI Training treats like that is Git. They don't teach, and not even necessarily Git, but like source code control in general. They treat it as this advanced topic. And man, if I was teaching Core 1 or Core 2, like that would be the two first things I would teach people is, first I would teach them source code control so they can go back. And then the second thing I would teach them would be unit testing so that you can say, hey, I wrote this code. How do I know it actually works and does what it's supposed to do?
Yeah.
So
Just like give an environment to your code in order to know if it works or another thing interesting about test-driven development is you write unit tests to test your code when passes and when fails, when it should fail. So you have to create maybe 2 unit tests to the same BI in order to know if what if I place wrong numbers, it should do something. So it is also.
Well, the other thing that I want to emphasize too, and it's tempting when you start, is to think that every VI needs a unit test, and I'm not entirely sure that's true. Yeah, exactly. You really want to try to. It sounds counter. Like if you're new to unit testing, what I'm saying might go over your head, and that's okay. But you need to test behavior because the behavior is less likely to change. The individual VIs will likely change because that's the implementation part. You need to test a higher level behavior. Yeah, but I feel like starting out, and an interesting thing to think about is instead of thinking about unit tests as tests, think of them as examples. I think is interesting. So examples, like if I was going to use this code, I would input these. Like for example, I'm putting together a workshop on TDD right now. Like if you were designing a stack, right? You push stuff on, you pop it off. The behavior would be if I push 3 things off and I pop 3 times, I get them back in the opposite order, right? Like the correct order. That's the behavior, right? So I would drop 3 constants. I say, okay, I'm going to push these 3 things in, and when I pop them off, they should come off in this order. And then inside that flat sequence structure, there'd actually be several flat sequence structures. One would be initialize the stack. Another one would be, inside a for loop, push 3 things onto the stack, and then inside another for loop, pop 3 things off. Yeah. Right. And then those would get turned into the 3. So there'd be end up with 4 sub VIs inside of there, right? Because I'm not testing just one sub VI. I'm testing the behavior of that object. Yeah. But I feel like that's difficult for beginners to grasp because they tend to think they want a test for every sub VI, but that's not really what you want. Yeah. It's
just for the most behavioral elements of your application where unit testing is really cool.
Yeah. And there are things that are hard to test too, like GUI stuff and stuff. So you have to, try to separate the logic and test just the logic. So I would love to continue this conversation. It's a really great conversation, but unfortunately, time is limited and I want to keep the podcast episode at a reasonable amount. So, thank you very much for joining me. I hope you enjoy the rest of GDevCon NA. I think it's going to be a great conference. And I'm really looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for the audience. And I hope everyone gets something from my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's it for today's episode of the LabVIEW Experiment. Thanks for listening. If you have any comments or questions, head over to thelabviewexperiment.com and drop me a note. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at the LV Experiment so you never miss an episode. And remember, small steps and quick feedback are all you need. Catch you next time. Yeah, I'm sure you'll do something that'll look good. Steven is the master.
Something like that.
Yeah. Well, we gotta put a thing at the end. You know how some of the podcasts thanks to blah 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 blah. We got to put thanks to Stephen at Spotted Dog Media for.
I'll take it.
Yeah. No, we totally should because you're the man.